we kick off this evening with a look at the cinema.
I'm not a complicated man. I like cinema.
It's beautiful, beautiful cinema.
Cinema history come to life.
I found my solace in the small cinema I went to every Thursday night.
I'm a professor of cinema.
I go to the cinema for the stories.
There was no competition between the cinema and seminar.
I mean, it's not within the realm of conventional cinema.
And now,
here's Pace and Johnson
with a cinema review.
It is Monday, December 16th, 7 EST, and thank you for joining me for another episode of Cinemaster's Reviews. Starting to wind down on the year. We still got a couple more episodes coming your way. We got two exciting movies we are reviewing tonight, that being Lord of the Rings, War of the Rohirrim, as well as Kraven the Hunter. I say we jump right in as we review our first movie of the week, Lord of the Rings, War of the Rohirrim. This is the newest film in the Middle-earth franchise. I think most people know what the Lord of the Rings films are. Obviously, The Hobbit is also part of Middle-earth. This is a new animated film directed by Kenji Kamiyama, and it is set 183 years before the events of Lord of the Rings. I believe that means except... I do not know. I want to say the Hobbit movies are set like 60 years. That's not important. What am I doing? This centers on the people of Rohan who are attacked by a traitorous soldier by the name of Wolf, voiced by Luca Pasqualino, and the people of Rohan, led by the great King Helm Hammerhead, have to make their final stand in order to protect their people. Also led by Hammerhead's daughter, Hera, voiced by an insane name. I put her down, Gaia Wise. I've always loved those original Lord of the Rings movies. I grew up with them. I just think they're like such this grand, like giant story following these characters as they go on this huge journey, starting from very small beginnings with Frodo and Sam in the Shire. They meet other characters. Really, really great stuff what Peter Jackson did with those movies. Obviously, Tolkien kind of like set the standard for fantasy. I've always also been like a huge fan of anime in general. So hearing that they were making a world set in the Lord of the Rings movie and it was going to be an anime movie, I was like curious. I was like, do we really need that? And watching this movie again, I'll be honest, while there are faults I had with it, while it's not like incredible, I cannot deny that I just really, really enjoyed what I was seeing. And I think the end product we got was really, really solid, especially if you are a fan of Middle-earth. The general vibe of just being back in this world is always great. Like hearing that music, seeing all these characters, seeing these worlds, like seeing Rohan, seeing Isengard, seeing all the elves. Like you have certain characters returned in this movie. Obviously, if you saw the trailers, you know that Eowyn is in this movie, and it's really, really great to see her. Obviously, you hear certain stories about things that we've heard in those original Lord of the Rings movies, and it's interesting seeing that. Obviously, with the name of Helm Hammerhead. I don't think it's a spoiler to say a lot of this movie is about why Helm's Deep is called Helm's Deep, and this movie ends with this huge battle at Helm's Deep with both Wolf and Helm Hammerhead going fighting each other, and it's really, really fun to see that. Oh, I got a comment. Let me just say that. I haven't seen it, but the animation looks beautiful. Yeah, I'll just go right into that. The animation from, let me get the director right, Kenji Kamiyama, his animation is absolutely incredible. Really captures the world, captures like those luscious, like, in my opinion, like greenish yellows that I think Middle-earth is so famous for. The reds look really, really striking. I love the designs of the characters. It looks like you are watching an animated version of all these characters and all these worlds that we've grown to love, and I really, really appreciated that. I think the animation kind of is a bit lacking is just how all the characters move and how everything sort of flows together. If you've ever watched, like, to me, like Studio Ghibli is sort of like the high watermark of like mainstream anime. And I think what Miyazaki is so good with those movies is how everything just flows so naturally, and all these characters feel so feel so realistic and while also evoking like this magical feeling. I think my major issue with this movie is a lot of the budget just didn't go to making all the characters' movements look very natural. Like I do think the way how their faces move, it does feel a little cheap. It does feel a little wooden, which sucks because when you are watching an animated movie like this, you want it to feel really visually striking, really animated, and it just doesn't quite get there. And I think it probably could have used a little bit more time in the cooker to really make that feel just a little bit more high quality. Because I think when you have an anime movie, I think one of the worst things you can say about it is that it looks very cheap. And there were some parts of this movie where I was like, yeah, it does look a little lower quality than I think you would want from the name of Lord of the Rings. The story is much smaller than the other Lord of the Rings movies. Obviously, that trilogy is about the Age of Man, like supposedly starting to fall, the orcs rising up, and man saying, "No, we are going to fight for ourselves." All these different races come to fight together. You have these characters going in order to destroy these rings. You have characters all around the world, like getting ready to fight the orcs to fight Sauron. This one is much, much smaller. You're focusing on one city of Rohan and one army led by King Hammerhead and one soldier who has had history with Hera. I know I've been saying Hammerhead a lot. The main character of this movie is probably Hera, who is the king's daughter. And learning how her and Wolf had history together, and just how she is handling everything. And you're just essentially watching these two warring factions try to gain control for Rohan. And it's interesting because the Lord of the Rings movies never really were about that. It really was just about like good versus evil. And while there definitely is a good and bad side in this movie, I think it was very interesting that you are seeing humans fighting humans, which is kind of fresh for this world. And I thought that was an interesting take. So yeah, while the story is a lot smaller than the Lord of the Rings trilogy, I don't think that was necessarily a bad thing. I think the one funny thing while watching this movie, the first thought that kind of came to my mind was, of all of the Lord of the Rings movies, I think this one needed to be animated the least, because I think this is the one that is like weirdly the most grounded. Like you have the most human characters, you have the most like just like normal battle scenes. You have a lot less like elves or like big dragons than The Hobbit or the Lord of the Rings movies. And I just found it funny that this was the story that they decided to make animated. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing, but I just don't think it was necessarily needed. The new characters such as Hera and Wolf, they're good. They're solid. I think Hera is your standard protagonist. This character that is sort of trying to find meaning in her world. She's obviously born into royalty. She wants to be a warrior, and she's waiting for her time to fight. She's finally seeing that with Wolf. Wolf is someone who I believe his father was killed by it was either his father or his brother was killed serving Helm Hammerhead, and he wants to take revenge for that. And his character goes in really unique ways, even when it seems like he's won the fight. He still just has like this bloodthirst for vengeance and trying to get revenge on Helm Hammerhead. But I keep mentioning his name. Helm Hammerhead is the best part of this movie. He's voiced by Brian Cox. Brian Cox does a phenomenal job voicing this character. And he's just kind of like a badass. Like he's this really great king. Like he's this guy you want to follow into war. He reminds me of Theoden from the original Lord of the Rings trilogy, who is the king of Rohan in that film. It's just awesome to see that like the king of Rohan was always like this really great character. And this character has like this more like Viking persona, where when he's fighting, he's got this awesome axe. He's just taking out armies just by himself. And when you have a name like Helm Hammerhead, you want someone that's just that badass. And just he was easily my favorite character in this movie, and the way and the place where the movie takes him is really, really fun. I do want to give the movie credit there. Another thing I was really surprised by is the movie is not afraid to kill important characters that we have grown to love, that we've grown to root for, like just like that. Like I think that's something that the Lord of the Rings films were always kind of criticized for, was just characters would just not only did they never seem to be in danger, but they would just die and then just come back either in that movie or in different movies, which is fine. But it is kind of aggravating when that happens multiple times per movie. And this movie does not have this issue. Now, I will admit, a lot of some of the characters that do die, they're not that memorable. But honestly, if you're going to kill off unmemorable characters, hey, at least you're showing that there are stakes in this movie. And that was the nice thing about this film, is that it does show that there are stakes with what we are watching. And we don't necessarily know if the good guys are going to win in this film. We might have like an idea of what's going to happen just with us knowing certain events that happen in the original Lord of the Rings trilogy. But I do think that does add a nice amount of stakes. And the last thing I want to say, this movie does a really good job of just peppering in these small little references. It never feels like it's distracting from the movie. But it does take the time to allude to moments in the original trilogy, to moments that happen in other Tolkien properties, and I do think that is really fun. Certain other characters that aren't Eowyn do show up. I will not say who they are, but it is very fun to see. And there are certain quotes, there are certain name drops that I do appreciate. And yeah, I just thought this was a really, really fun movie. If I were to rate this movie on a scale of 0 to 10 videotapes, 0 being absolutely awful, 10 being absolutely incredible, I think I'm gonna give it a nice solid 7.5 out of 10. If you saw my Letterboxd review, you saw that I gave it a 4 out of 5, which is closer to an 8. Gonna go a little bit lower than that now that I've had more time to think about it, because I do think that rating was a little bit inflated. There are some issues. I do think some parts of it does look a little cheap. The story was mainly just very standard, but I think for what it was, if you just love this world and love like high fantasy, I think this was a really unique take on Lord of the Rings. And with it being with Middle Earth being such this gigantic world, it's fun to just see these cool, unique stories in this world. If you're a fan of Lord of the Rings, I would highly recommend seeing this in theaters. If you're not, it's probably not going to win you over. Then I would just recommend just saving it for streaming. But yeah, if you're a fan of fantasy, if you're a fan of animated movies that aren't necessarily for kids, I would highly recommend you go see this in theaters. But yeah, I see we head right into our second review for the night for a movie that I'm not quite as high on, that being Kraven the Hunter. This is the latest film in the, I want to make sure I get this right, the Sony Picture universe of Spider-Man characters, also known as the whatever. This is the studio that brought you Venom. This is the studio that brought you Morbius. This is the studio that brought you Madam Web. I'm just going to say this is the studio that brought you nothing but crap. This is a movie that centers on a Russian by the name of Dmitri, played by Aaron Taylor Johnson. As we open on him, we see that he is in prison because he is hunting people that have wronged him in the past. And he is returning to Russia in order to protect his brother and his father, as they are being hunted by another hunter by the name of Alexei, who has taken an interest in both his brother and his dad, and Kraven is trying to protect him. As I said, this universe has kind of been like an embarrassing failure of like different levels of bad. Like I think Venom Let There Be Carnage is a terrible movie, but I think it's kind of fun. The first Venom movie is just sort of mediocre. I think Morbius and Madam Web are just absolutely awful. This movie isn't quite as bad as the worst of those, but it's not good by any means. What I will say is Aaron Taylor Johnson, he's trying his best in this role. He's able to play tough pretty okay. When you're just seeing scenes of him just finding these random millionaires and just hunting them down, it is kind of fun. And he is not checked out, which I do appreciate. It's not like a Dakota Johnson situation in Madam Web where she just seemed like she was sleepwalking through that entire movie. Aaron Taylor Johnson is actually trying to find the good parts of the script, even though it is a terrible script. The actual dialogue of these characters, it seems like it is the most like first draft dialogue you will ever hear. Characters are just talking in these huge exposition dumps. We never really learn why the characters feel this way. Movie is a giant cast, and aside from Russell Crowe, who plays Kraven's dad, who is a ton of fun. I will give the movie that Russell Crowe is having a lot of fun in this movie. Every other cast member is just wasted, or in one circumstance just kind of bad. Ariana DeBose, Oscar winner for West Side Story. She plays a lawyer who teams up with Kraven in order to help him take down these other hunters. She is absolutely wasted. She's given nothing to do. Kraven's brother is played by Fred Hetchinger. You probably saw him last in Gladiator 2. He played one of the Roman emperors. He's not very good. Alessandro Nivolo. He's an actor I've liked in the past. He's really great in The Art of Self-Defense. He's in The Many Saints of Newark. He's trying something in this movie. He's trying to play like, how would I say this? He's almost kind of being like the Russian version of Jared Leto's Joker, and it does not work at all. Like every time, like everything of what he's doing, it just feels laughable. It seems like he's not taking the movie seriously, which I get when you have a script this bad. It's kind of hard to take it seriously, but I can't say that it's a good performance. And every time he was on screen, he was just extremely distracting, because I just don't think he's giving much to this material in order to make it work. The opening prologue of this film, where you're watching the younger version of Dmitri and Sergei, I was just almost falling asleep because of how dull it was. It reminds me of like it kind of felt like a bad HBO show where you're in like this like sandy parts of Europe. You're watching these kids in boarding schools, and you're just sort of bored the whole time. The kid they got to play, the young Kraven, is not good. Like I didn't write his name down because I didn't want to spotlight him, because I didn't want to feel like I'm just bullying this young kid. But you could have picked a better child actor. And then just when we jump to the present, you're just watching Kraven just sort of kill these other hunters. This is not a fun movie to review because it's not horrible. It's just dull. It's just boring. The movie goes on for around 2 hours. It feels like it's going on for 4 hours because this is clearly a plot. They did not have enough material in order to make it a full, like, feel like a full, a completely fulfilling story. And you're just watching this like story that should have been an hour and a half be stretched out to 2 hours, which only makes it feel like 4 hours. And you just feel really, really bored by the end of it. The action is okay. I will give the movie credit there. When you actually do have Kraven like taking on all these hunters, it is actually kind of fun. The CGI is terrible. Without spoiling too many things, there are a lot of times where you see a lot of CGI animals, and you can very clearly tell that they are fake animals. A certain character does transform by the end of this movie. If you saw the trailer, I'll just say Alexei ends up transforming into a rhino. If you know the Spider-Man comics, you know that character does end up becoming the rhino. Instead of having him in a giant rhino suit, he becomes like a half man, half rhino. And he just looks so laughable. He looks like a Power Rangers character. You just roll your eyes when you see it, and it just completely takes you out of the final fight between Kraven and the Rhino, and you just can't help but roll your eyes. The movie's still trying to force like certain Spider-Man references in, because it keeps on wanting to tell you, like, look, we know we can't use the character of Spider-Man, but we're going to use all these different references to this world. And there's no way to make that interesting as far as I'm concerned. Yes, we like these characters, but we like it because they're all attached to Spider-Man. And when you take Spider-Man out of it, you just can't help but not feel invested. This movie kind of tries to sequel bait at the end, but Sony has already announced this is probably going to be the last movie in this whole universe. And as far as I'm concerned, good riddance, because I don't think there's really been a good movie in this cinematic universe of films. If I were to rate this movie on a scale of 0 to 10 videotapes, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 10. It's not the worst thing in this in the world. Like Madam Web to me was like, I either gave it like a 2 or a 1. I think Madam Web is a far, far worse movie than this. But this still isn't good. If you really are just like a hardcore completionist about this film, about this franchise, go and see it. I guess that's maybe the only. You might be the only type, like, you might be the only group of that this movie is for. If not, don't waste your time. Maybe if you have an afternoon to kill, check it out. There's really nothing nothing important to recommend about this film. But yeah, that does bring us to the end of our show. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to like this video and subscribe to the video so it helps grow our channel a lot. Next week is going to be the last show of 2024. I'm going to be reviewing Mufasa the Lion King as well as Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Really excited for those. Thank you all for tuning in. And remember, as always, until next time, watch more movies.
And the award for most vapid film review of the century goes to...
Okay, movie review. Okay, I thought it was Beauty.
And he's now in cinema hell, where one day we'll all be reunited.
This is me at the Regal Cinema crying as I did through much of the film.